Yeah, this talk is called React and the Inner Source Ecosystem. And it's kind of the story of how we work at Compare the Market, how we work with React, how we build components and share them amongst the company, how we kind of make our development maintainable, sustainable, and the kind of benefits that we get out of that. If the buttons work, yay. Okay, so introduction, this is to warm me up to this. So, hi, I'm James. I'm a tech lead at Compare the Market. I work on a React development team. And I don't actually work in this office. We have 3 offices. We have one in London, obviously. We have one in Minsk, and we have one in Peterborough, which is where I'm from. Peterborough, this is all icebreaker stuff. Peterborough's a lovely place, 50 minutes down the, train line, 50 minutes away. Has a cathedral, has a Lido, lovely. But the trains, had a fantastic time on the train in today, broke down, they've been having problems, fun stuff. Anyway, so Compare the Market, to give you a bit of background first off. We have in our tech division about 300 people. We have 18 teams. We have 12 core products like car, bike, van insurance, home insurance, life insurance. Those are our 12 main products. And we have 3 locations that we're spread across. Inner source. Inner source is a kind of term that we've picked up. It sounds a bit made up. It's like open source. We didn't make it up, but we've stolen it, we've taken it, and inner source is the kind of name we use to talk about working collaboratively in the company. And thinking about something that we can come and present about, it's kind of what I think is unique about us. Like, I can't come up and talk about hooks because I'd be terrified because I don't know how to use them, and I'm sure loads of people know how to use them. So I'm going to talk a bit about how we work, and hopefully it'll be interesting. So what is inner source? Inner source is basically collaboration, but that seems obvious. So to set the scene a little bit, to kind of go back to where we were before we started this inner source process. This is what's called a Gartner hype cycle, a chart of how companies kind of grow, how products get out there. We're in this sort of red circle, or we like to imagine we're in this red circle now. We have, as a company, we started over 10 years ago. It was something a few months ago. It was the 10-year anniversary of introducing Alexander and all the meerkats to the public. So as a company, we've been around for a while, and we've had this, from when we started, we had a big rapid growth. We had one core product, and then we duplicated that and did loads more products and broke out into different markets and expanded really quickly. And then kind of from a development point of view, from a technical point of view, things kind of started slowing down. Once you take a code base and you copy and paste it 12 times and start modifying it, it starts dragging you down, starts bringing you back. So we are trying to change the way we're working to be more sustainable, to share more code, to work better, and we're progressing up this up towards the plateau of productivity. So our sort of company structure, which has been around for a long time, we have this kind of we have these main products, and each of these products has its own development team, and that's a multidisciplinary team that has front-end developers, back-end developers, product owners, business analysts, all that kind of stuff. But that kind of leads you inevitably down a bit of a siloed development path, where if you make all these product teams independent, they can make their own code base, they can release their own code independently, but they start getting very insular and not sharing code very well. So inner source is kind of part of an effort to get away from this siloed development. And continuing on the whole why inner source thing, if we go back a few years, you can see the downside of siloed development coming out in the front end, in the components we used. Think we had a lot of inconsistency going on, and then that's the visual inconsistency, and we got the same inconsistency starting to happen in the back end. So we needed an initiative to kind of take us away from this siloed development, and that's inner source. And another thing we learned whilst doing that is that the first time you try and do something, you don't necessarily come up with the best solution. And if you don't go back and learn from that, if you don't take what you've learnt by doing it wrong, you never improve. And if we've got 12 silos going on, developing things, doing things for the first time, it's not very good, it's not very efficient. So this is kind of what drives us to want to collaborate more. We end up with development silos. It gives you a lot of independence, but it comes at a cost. And I guess the solution to this is obvious. It's to start sharing code. And we've tried that before. But inner source, the stuff we're doing now is kind of initiative to do it properly, make it work, keep it sustainable. That's what you want to do. You want to make it work. So the way that we make it work, previously when we've tried it and it maybe didn't work, is when we had a few developers on different teams say, I've built a perfect button component, I've built a perfect navigation component. Here you are, just like, here's our CTM UI framework, everybody copy paste that. That kind of thing doesn't work if it's led by individuals. So our plan is to create teams to do it. And this is kind of our product grid, but with inner source teams in the middle. So we've got our 12 products, and then we've got new teams that we've set up. This team in the middle is my React development team, and we are collaborating we're going out to all of the product teams, finding the components that they've done that could be reshared, and starting to standardize them. We're taking bits from each of the products, putting them in one central place, and spreading it back out to the rest of the teams as well. So why do teams work? Teams are better than individuals for this kind of thing, because if your team owns a project, if your team owns a set of components, like React is perfect for this because you can start standardizing components. But if it's owned by an individual, it lives and dies with that individual and their effort and their resource and everything like that. If you create a team to do your inner sourcing, the team owns the codes, the team can provide support, the team has time and resource to dedicate to things, and it can have a vision that outlasts an individual. If someone makes something and moves off to a different team or project or gets bored of it, like, the ownership is persistent, it's cool. And yeah. So that's the high level what we do. We collaborate through inner sourcing. I'm going to do a bit of the technical details of how we do our React components, because hopefully that'll be interesting. So I mentioned before that we have a team. This is the name of my team. Can anyone imagine where we came up with the name for Meerstrap from? You don't have to imagine. This is roughly how it went. So we started as an inner sourcing React team when the opportunity came to redevelop the bike insurance journey, and we said, right, React is a great bit of technology. We'll use it. We'll standardize everything. We'll do it properly. And we did, and then the team came, once we'd proven that it worked, we said, right, we'll have a team, we'll split off and own shared components, and then we can roll them out to the other 11 products. And then we needed to come up with a name, and we couldn't come up with anything better. I think unimaginative names are a bit of a common trend with the stuff we do. Like a team name, we have a team vision, which gives us a lot of nice leeway to do things. Basically, we are here to drive innovation through the business, and we will do that through shared components and tools. So that gives us the opportunity to do what we want to a certain extent, so long as it's meeting that goal. And basically, what we do is we publish a set of NPM packages, and we publish that to an internal code registry. So it behaves just like open source stuff, but only if you're on our network with the right credentials. And we've done this in a very gradual process. The first thing we did was components, looking at like the atomic design principles. We standardized what buttons look like, what input fields look like, what date pickers look like, what navigation look like, all these kind of things. And then we learned as we went along through different journeys. We did validation libraries next, because there wasn't anything that in the open source community that really suited what we needed it to do. So we built our own. And then we looked at Insights, which is basically integration with our analytics providers. And Meerkit, very imaginative name, but that is a wrapper for the first three, so that our journey building becomes more drag and drop. And then how we work with cookies got standardized. And price calculator, this is some logic about how you calculate monthly repayments based on an annual price, that kind of stuff. Logic that can be shared and reused throughout the business gets taken in by our team and then standardized, tested, supported, and passed out to the rest of the company. And more recently, we've started looking outside of just doing code bundles and started doing CLI tools. So we've come up with Meerscripts, which wraps the Create React app stuff. And then whenever we're starting a new project or a new experimental thing, you do the same thing. You create a new project and then install this component and this component and this component and do this and put the header there and the footer there with this text. We wrap that all up in a CLI tool to just generate that for us and just get the install time from like 2 hours to 5 minutes, which is nice. So that's the practical stuff that we do on our team. In terms of the stuff that's particularly special or the secret sauce about how we do it, we steal a lot from open source and from existing libraries. So these are all things that we've taken on. But mono repos, if you come across them, I think that's how a lot of projects are working now. When that came out, we investigated it. We had, before mono repos, we had this situation where we were maintaining 7 different repositories of code. Terrible idea, or too much admin work to get any releases done. So we went for mono repos instead, and that's been really good. We concentrate a lot on the developer experience, and that means writing documentation. We do live component previews through Storybook. I don't want to read all of this out, but I seem to be doing that. Basically, we take the best ideas that we see in the community and use them ourselves. So, I mean, this is kind of as technical as we're probably going to get, but this is roughly our release process, very, very roughly. What we do, we publish those 7 modules to an internal registry that other people can pick up code from. As well as that, we're also publishing example applications to show how we think, how we anticipate our code modules being used in the real world. And we generate documentation, and we use Storybook for previews. So our kind of release process, whenever we've got some code, whenever we want to share that with the rest of the company, we write the JavaScript, we write the test for the JavaScript, of course. We have GoCD is our continuous integration server, and that's integrated with our tests and with our GitHub pull requests. So we write code, we push code up to the master branch or up to a branch, and the CI server picks up the test, runs the test automatically, reports the results of that to a pull request so we can review it in GitHub. Assuming everything's fine, we merge it to master, and then we use Learner and our own magical scripts to initiate a release. We publish a compiled version of the code to NPM or to our own private NPM. We publish all the details of the release on GitHub, so it all appears properly in the interface, it's properly tagged, because that helps people a lot. And we publish out, as well as our example applications, we publish out to an internal Storybook and to an internal Docusaurus documentation site. So whenever we write code and release code, it's there for all the developers on the other teams in the company to pick up and explore and play around with. And that's as technical as we get for this. To show you kind of what they look like, if you haven't seen them, this first one's Storybook, which is like a it's an atomic design sort of website. It's or interface. You can go in, you can preview a button, you've got panels to configure the button and set all the React properties, so people can basically, with no technical knowledge, no setup, you can go up and play around with our components and know how we expect them to work. And then as good practice, we write documentation for our stuff, basically so people don't have to. We're only a team of 6 people in a company of 300 tech, so we can't go out, we can't support all of those people by going and speaking directly to them, so we write documentation so we don't have to bother with that. And then only when they've got a problem with the documentation can they, well, they can always come and bother us, but we'll refer them to the documentation otherwise. Okay, so enough on that. There's a few development principles that we kind of have as a team to make things work, and they are this lot. We have a consistent code style because you should. Making the best technical solution, the easiest solution, is path of least resistance. That's the way to get your code out and working and things. Minimize peer dependencies. This is a lesson that we've kind of learned the hard way. When we started off our project, we assumed that people were using React and Redux, and they were using it in a certain way, and they eventually, as more and more teams adopted our modules, we learned that not everyone works the same way we do, and they don't all want to have to install Redux just to be able to use our code. So we are slowly but surely removing all those weird dependencies from our project so that people can do what they want with our code. Same as compiling, we do a lot of our styles in Sass, but not everyone has a Sass compiler in their toolchain. They use other things. Storybook is all about, and our documentation is all about making it possible for people to discover the components we build and how we expect them to be used. And we do a lot of communication on public channels or internal channels like Slack and others, about what we're doing and why we're doing it and how things are to be used. And although our code, our modules that we produce are our priority, they're not everyone else's priority. So we keep a migration plan in place for those that can't update as much as we want them to. So the stuff that I think works well, if you're going to produce any modules, or even if you're not going to try and do what we do, which is share code through npm modules, is automate the boring stuff, the repetitive stuff. If you have code guidelines, as we do, that expect people to write a change log for any changes they make, you don't want to be nagging them about it. So automate what you can. The GitHub UI has been a really nice thing for us. It's built, it knows what we want, like integration with tags and releases and issues and pull requests. It's cool. It's better than our other alternative, at least, which is Jira. Documentation in a variety of formats is good. Storybook component previews are really good, but most importantly, working with the people, pairing with our consumers of our code to see, like sitting with them and saying, how do you expect this to be used, or what do you expect this to do, works really well to help us understand how people are using our stuff. So that's part one. Part two is what I've called ecosystems, and we kind of got a bit towards that, but we make modules to be shared, but what really matters is how people are using them and how you monitor whether people are using them and how successful it's being. So I call that the ecosystem, and the ecosystem is anyone that's using your code, anyone that could use your code, anything that could be built in React for this, anything. Our ultimate goal is to get all of our standardized code out to everyone, whether they think that it will be helpful for them or not at this point. We think it will. But the way to make that work, at least I think, is you treat it like an ecosystem and you kind of nurture it. So we're a small team, we can't force our code down people's throats, but we can encourage them in the right ways to use our code. Key to that, I think, is making it easy for them to start using our code, start seeing the benefits, being open with communication, and basically doing all of these things to encourage the growth, the adoption of our centralized shared code. And then once we've got more and more people using our stuff, we'll start getting more and more people feeling free to contribute to things. The ultimate goal is that we are the curators of the code rather than dictating what we have in our ecosystem, what components are available. We want people to be saying, oh, it would be really good if we had a postcode picker component that we could use, and then for them to go on and feel that they can go and use it themselves, they can make it and contribute it. That's where we want to be. So we are basically nurturing this ecosystem to get growth in the company, get traction, and keep our code relevant for people. And part of that is an acceptance that we don't know everything. Like, this is bastardizing this graphic a bit, which is talking about imposter syndrome, but the same sort of thing applies to our business. Our team, we have a vision of how things are to be used, but we don't know how everyone's going to use it, and we don't know what things people need. So we get them to contribute it. We get them to fill in the gaps, and then we'll know everything we need to know. Okay. One of the kind of cool things that we can do, because we're like a closed ecosystem, is we can check everyone else's code bases and see what they're actually doing. We can measure ourselves against our goal of getting our code used everywhere by building tools, and this is one of them that we've built that is built on top of the GitHub search API, and we can find instances of our code used throughout the business and track how it progresses. And if people are using old versions of code that if we find an issue in things that need to be fixed and that needs to be rolled out to everywhere, we can monitor whether people are properly doing updates and chase them down if they're not. So it's really useful. But basically what we try to do as a supporting team inside the company, as an inner sourcing team, is focus on the experience that our developers have. We assume everyone always wants to do their best work, but they will do what they already know and they trust. So our challenge is to get them to know and trust our code. We know that people have a limited capacity for taking on new things all the time. So we drip feed them the information. We give them to it in various levels of detail to get them on board. We reduce friction for them adopting it by writing the documentation, by doing the component previews, by writing demo applications. We assume everyone wants to learn something new all the time. We assume they want to know how it works. And we assume that they will eventually want to contribute and influence the future development. And that's why we do all the things we do. And we're nearly there. Nearly there. As a final kind of thing, React is awesome. It's certainly, you all know that, right? It's much better. It's a much better way of rolling out standardized components and reusable bits of logic than anything we've seen previously. So I'm sure it will continue. But we know from prior experience and general wisdom that we don't get things right first time. So we embrace change. We encourage people to contribute to our stuff. We take the best bits from all of our projects, standardize them in a central place, and wait to see what we learn off the back of that. But we've tried this before, not with React admittedly, but we've tried initiatives of standardizing things before, and they don't work in the long term because we don't support them properly. So we have teams to support them, to do maintenance, to dedicate time to doing this, and if you spend extra effort with the purpose of saving people effort, that's how we think we're going to win. And that's it. Any questions?